Hello, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. I'm Rick Anthony. If you've been to a hospital lately or any medical facility, you've probably noticed that members of the clinical staff, nursing staff in particular, have recently come from Eastern Europe, the Caribbean, the Philippines, Asia, or Mexico. In fact, it's estimated that 25% of the nurses in this country speak English as a second language, and that ratio is expected to increase as more and more nurses come in from foreign countries because of the increasing demand for nursing staff in this country, partly because of an aging population. Should that be a concern, the fact that we have an increasing number of foreigners who are taking care of us in this country? Some think so. The argument goes that nurses, as well as other healthcare clinicians who come from other cultures and speak with a pronounced accent, may result in poor communication, which could put patients at risk and possibly injury or death. It's a complex issue that warrants more research. There's very little research on this topic because a linguistic misunderstanding can have devastating consequences regardless of how competent the nurse or doctor may be. My guest today, Dr. Ted Ewing, is a linguist, educator, educational designer, and entrepreneur. His company, Communicating Clearly, is developing an online program to help foreign-born nurses become more proficient in the English language. Welcome, Ted, to the Entrepreneurs Network.
Thanks, Rick.
Let's start by taking an entrepreneurial approach to the subject. Please briefly define the problem, as you have come to understand it, and briefly describe your solution, Communicating Clearly.
Well, the brief description is medical errors. Medical errors in particular caused by miscommunication. They're an all too frequent occurrence in America's hospitals, and they put patients and hospitals at risk. And you know, the Wall Street Journal and other medical journals have come out recently and said that medical errors are the third leading cause of death in the United States, behind heart disease and cancer. That's, you know, pretty scary.
But when people hear medical error, I think most of us think of they operated on the wrong arm, the wrong foot, the wrong part of the body, because that's what we hear about.
Exactly, exactly. And
it's
and
much
all
more
those,
than that.
It is more than that. All those are included in medical errors. As you get down specifically, the number one cause of medical errors is communication. Bad communication, communication breakdowns. Now, within that subset, the fact is that there are a lot of people coming into the United States that speak English as a second language. They're competent, they're capable, but they have difficulty communicating their capability and their competence because they speak heavily accented English. Not only that, and that's something you mentioned up front, but the other side of the problem is that this U.S. Census Bureau predicts that the United States will be a minority-majority nation by 2043. In other words, a collection of minorities will be the majority, meaning that there are so many more people, patients and families, that speak English as a second language that native English-speaking nurses have to deal with. And so it's a two-way street in terms of communication.
You told me that you know of some hospitals where signage is in 5 or more languages?
Yeah, there's a friend of mine who works in a hospital up in New York, and there's a Lutheran hospital in Brooklyn. And I was telling her about, you know, Spanish and English dual signage, and she said, that's a joke. She said, we have 5 languages on all of our signs throughout the hospital.
But John Whitman, with whom we have met, who's an expert in long-term care, et cetera, didn't he say there was one institution with 127 different languages or dialects?
Yeah, well, here's the thing.
Representing the community that they're serving.
The communities that they're serving. The thing is, for example, when you say someone comes from India, well, there are 50 Indian dialects that are spoken by over 1 million people. That's a lot of variation in language. And everybody speaks English in the healthcare system in the United States, but what they bring is this, a lot of the consonant sounds and the vowel sounds that we are familiar with in English don't exist in other languages, and therefore pronunciation is difficult.
And to be clear, we're not casting aspersions on foreign-born nurses, other caretakers in our healthcare system. Thank God they're here.
Absolutely.
And my experience in the local hospital has been that they're absolutely excellent. They're compassionate, they're caring, et cetera, et cetera. But I must say, I've had difficulty trying to understand them sometimes. I remember one instance in particular. I was trying to order from the kitchen a grilled cheese sandwich. It took 2 telephone calls for me to understand that what he was telling me, now this wasn't a nurse obviously, but
Sure.
what he was trying to explain to me was I had to get an authorization form of some kind from the nurse. And on the second try, he said to me, "You don't understand." I don't understand.
Well,
It's even worse when you say, "I want grilled cheese, but cut the crust."
well, you see, cut the crust is a common idiom
Yeah.
that's misunderstood by people from other countries.
Exactly.
But idioms, for example, are so embedded in our culture that we use them without
Yes.
even thinking about
Yes.
them. And especially around the issues of, say, bowel movements, urination, and death. I mean, what other language do you know where kicked the bucket, bought the farm, gave up the ghost, went home, et cetera, all mean the same thing? Someone died.
Yeah.
They're on their last legs. They gave up the ghost. There's
Yeah.
over 200 idioms embedded in our language that have to do with death.
Okay, so that's the problem. And
That's part of the problem.
It's part of the problem, but it is complex and it's becoming more pervasive. What did you come up with as a solution?
Well, we really felt that the failure to address issues of language proficiency, cultural differences, and communication results in higher patient risk, higher institutional risk, lower quality care, and also decreased revenues for hospitals. So we put together a curriculum, an online curriculum made up of 15 lessons, 15 videos, pre-tests, post-tests, note-taking outlines, examples, etc. But again, it's all online on a learning management system that addresses all of these issues of cultural sensitivity, cultural competency, patient safety, and our theme for communicating clearly, which was the name of the product as well, is listen to understand and speak to be understood, because this is directed towards native English speakers as well as internationally educated nurses, because a native English speaker walks into a room and needs to listen to understand if her patients have foreign accents, and a nurse who is educated abroad needs to come in and be able to speak to be understood if her patients are native English speakers.
Now, my understanding is for a foreign-born nurse to gain entry to the country and to be licensed to practice as a nurse, don't they have to pass a test to demonstrate that they have some competency, if not proficiency, with the English language?
They do. It's called the NCLEX. It's the licensing exam, and anybody that's going to be a registered nurse, a licensed practical nurse, or a vocational nurse in the United States has to pass that exam.
But that's a relatively low threshold.
It's a the problem is that there are not stringent requirements for spoken English, and even if you look at the standards on ACTFL, the American Teachers of Commission on Teachers of Foreign Languages, you can see people giving video presentations. They're from Nigeria, they're from Asia, they're from India, etc. And they have to be able to argue in a way which presents both concrete and abstract thought together, present a thesis and support it with an argument. But the problem is, those who are superior in those categories can do that, but their pronunciation is still insufficient to communicate clearly. And healthcare is all about information management,
Yes.
and clear communication is critical.
I said at the top that there's little research on the correlation, to the extent that it exists, direct correlation between the proficiency with the English language and the ability to express yourself clearly, and medical errors, but more specifically injury and death resulting from poor communication. Is there no research at all? I know there's research on causes of medical errors, handoff, patient handoff, shift changes, those kinds of things where communication breaks down.
There's very little research. I spoke last week with the head of research at the Joint Commission who accredits hospitals all across America. And I said, this is what I'm looking for. I wrote it to him in an email. It was very specific. I am looking for the research on the role that foreign accents play in communication breakdowns that cause sentinel events and impact patient safety. Could you let me know where it's going on? And he said, I know of none.
That's amazing.
It's not that it doesn't exist. Here's the amazing thing. Everyone knows it's a problem. If you talk to any nurse or clinician that works at the bedside, anyone that's ever been to a doctor office, anyone that's ever had nurse-doctor communication, everyone knows it's a problem. But I'm not really sure why there hasn't been a lot of work done on it to both research it and secondarily to address it.
So you and your sister, right, who is a nurse?
Yes, Roberta Harbison.
Okay.
She's an MSN.
Have been developing this over how long a period?
About 5 years. Did 5 years worth of research and work. You know, my background's in education, and so I wanted to communicate it clearly and, you know, have a tightly developed curriculum that I make sure people are learning what we're presenting. And then I told Roberta, I said, I'm going to send it off to you to nursify it. You have to put in all the nursing applications and illustrations. And in the process, we developed a great working relationship. I got to know healthcare better, and you know, her illustrations were very poignant.
So you had 5 lessons or modules, I beg your pardon, 15.
15.
Lessons or modules
Yeah.
that are completed and are available online, or will be available online?
They'll be available in the next 8 weeks, by the fall of 2016.
Okay, the purpose of which, at least as you originally conceived it, is to satisfy the CEU requirements that nurses have?
Right. Our course has been accredited for continuing education by the State Board of Nursing, Pennsylvania. However, there's another benefit besides just nurses being able to get continuing education, and that is it has a benefit for the hospital, the institution as a whole, to mitigate risk and ensure patient safety. And that's why we're not marketing really to individual nurses, but to hospitals as a unit, because we want the entire hospital staff of nurses taking this course at the same time, talking about it at shift change, at handoff meetings, and we even have a whole list of follow-up exercises that you can talk about on the floor with your nurse manager to be able to take information and let it lead to transformation. We want to take what's factual and make it actual.
Earlier you gave us some examples of idioms.
Yes.
In the language. Can you give us some other more specific examples of the problems with accents, pronunciation?
Sure.
Because that's at the core of this, right?
Well, there's a lot of different things that we use to communicate. Pronunciation is one of them, but idioms. There was a doctor in a recent journal who prescribed increased psychotic meds for a patient because he came in and said, "How are you sleeping?" And she said, "I slept like a log." And he thought that she was pretending to be a log, and so he increased her psych meds. But there are other things apart from idioms.
That actually happened?
Yeah, that happened. That was in a journal. We pulled that out and put it right in our curriculum. But there's other things like body language, things that mean different things in different cultures. Eye contact. All right, in American culture, eye contact is a requirement. In Asian cultures and some Caribbean cultures, you defer to authority by not looking in the eye. But I don't know how you grew up, but my mom and dad were always saying, "Look at me when I'm talking to you."
Oh yes,
well,
or else.
Yeah, or else. And the same is true in healthcare. There's issues of stress and rhythm. A pronunciation issue might be consonant sounds or vowel sounds. But for example, let's say you have an Indian doctor who calls in medication to a nurse, and she says, and he says, "Give the patient 50 milligram codeine PRN for pain." And she says, 50 milligrams PRN, codeine PRN for pain. Well, he said 50, 1-5. But he put the emphasis on the wrong syllable that might cause the nurse to make a life-threatening mistake. And so she writes 50, but he was saying 1-5. It happens over and over if you can't say simple consonant sounds like D and T. Have you ever heard somebody say, "Dies is the one"?
Yes.
Dies. Well, there's this. is D and T and TH are often confused, and E and I are confused. So if you take those couple of examples, or like L and R, you know, there's always the Asian joke that's not very funny about, you know, French flies, you know, etc. What's the difference between bleeding and breathing? It's just two consonant sounds, L and R, and two vowel sounds, E. And the E is the same, but it's L and R and D and TH, two sets of consonants.
In the example you gave a moment ago, why wouldn't the nurse, if there was any question about what the instruction the doctor had just given her, why wouldn't the nurse play it back to him? Doctor, did you mean 15, 1-5?
Well, one of the standards that the Joint Commission has instituted is being able to you know, is feeding back for confirmation. Okay? So that does happen. But if you've ever been in a hospital,
yes,
you know that nurses, more than anything else, are rushed and exhausted.
Yes.
And sometimes you're tired of talking, especially if the person is prickly on the other end of the line, and you just say, I got it. It's 50. And he hears 50 because he pronounced 50 when it's actually 1-5.
But Ted, the stakes are so high.
Well, the stakes are high. And the strange thing is, Rick, is that everybody experiences this in all walks of life. My sister was in an airport last week, and so many people were grumbling because there was a gate change, and the person spoke in heavily accented English, and no one could understand what the change was. Also, people may be on the phone with customer service dealing with their credit card company, and it's outsourced to another country, and they get that heavily accented English. They can't understand the thing that's saying. Well. In an airport, you miss your flight, and with your credit card company, they may lose your business. But in healthcare, you die. It's critical. Communicating clearly is critical in healthcare because information management is a primary task.
You've told me that within the 15 modules, and that was the other example you gave me, module?
Yeah, I was watching a training on how to do Adobe Articulate today, and a woman spoke with an Indian dialect, and she said, we have several more Jews. And I thought, several more Jews? Why do you need several more Jews? And I played it back, and I played it back, and then finally I had to listen to the whole context, and she was saying we have several modules, but it came across several more Jews.
And that was not changed. That was not fixed. That was not corrected.
No,
it was in a training.
Yeah, it was in a training program. Yeah, for their program.
You've told me that within the 15, as I understand it, there are 5 or so that represent really the core of the program, and an engine that you are developing that will include a medical vocabulary.
Yeah, correct.
That will be unique, unlike anything that now exists. That really intrigued me.
I don't know of any that exist, but what we have is we have a voice analysis engine. It's pronunciation analysis. Everybody's familiar with voice recognition technology.
Yes.
You know, you speak and you text, recognizes your voice. But actually what we've done is we have taken and loaded the phonemes, the sounds of over 200,000 vocabulary words in the English language. And then we added medical vocabulary. And so when the person sits down in lessons 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, the middle third, they have to read medical vocabulary-filled sentences that they would use on a daily basis in healthcare. And what they do is that it is then analyzed, and they come back with a score to see how proficient they were in their pronunciation.
So I pick up the phone and I say something. Is that right?
Right.
It doesn't have to be in person. I can do it remotely.
It's done remotely because it's done with an open voice recorder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you might say we might be working on the D, T, TH, and the and th sounds, and you would have to read the diagnosis of diabetes caused the endocrinologist to discover ketones in the blood. And what an engine will do is it will give you a score on the accuracy of your American English pronunciation.
So which of those words is likely to be mispronounced?
Well, all of them with a TH, D, or a T.
Okay.
It's as simple as a thing as, you know, my name is Ted. If you don't know how the difference, between T and D. And here's the other key thing, Rick. You can't reproduce the difference unless you can recognize the difference. So you have to be able to hear the difference between T and D in order to speak the difference between D and T. And so my name is Ted, but I might be introduced as Tet or Det, or, you know, and I much prefer, you know, this is Ted to this is dead.
Okay. Let me go back, though. You are an entrepreneur. You've got a concept. You're taking the concept to idea to something that hopefully will be commercialized. But you're still this side of proof of concept. You don't have data to prove to an investor that there is not only a need, but a market.
Right.
What do you have to do to get proof of concept?
Well, we're looking for validation.
Nobody else is doing it for you. There's no data.
No, we're looking for validation. But you have to remember that validation comes in different ways. For example, no matter what I teach, if I'm looking for validation, I can give a post-test to see if they got what I'm teaching.
Yes.
But then there's validation if it changes a circumstance that I want to change. So the great thing about our process is that it's an empirically developed curricula. We have pre-tests, we have post-tests. We're measuring constantly and revising whether or not we're communicating what we're trying to communicate. Then what we want to do is put it in a pilot study and a further research project and see if it indeed does mitigate risk, if it does indeed increase HCAP scores, which will increase hospital revenue.
HCAP is what?
HCAPs. These are the Press-Ganey surveys.
Okay.
They're basically
on customer
satisfaction,
patient satisfaction,
patient experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what happens is the organizations that control the funding for Medicare and Medicaid, they dispense reimbursements to hospitals based on the level of their HCAPs or Press-Ganey scores. And so if your scores go up, and 5 of the 22 questions have to deal with clear communication.
Yeah.
And we address the issues that those questions address in our curriculum.
So this issue of efficiency, accuracy, and timeliness of communication is all the more important as we move towards bundled payments, and the risk is being shifted to the healthcare provider under Obamacare.
Absolutely.
And the transformation that's occurring in healthcare. Absolutely.
And that's why healthcare has become customer satisfaction driven.
Yes.
It's patient experience driven.
Patient-centric.
It's all about risk and revenue.
You've got an eclectic background. You've got
that's a nice word.
Yeah, well, you do. You've got more degrees than you probably need. But what in your background experience has brought you to this particular opportunity? You're a linguist, you're an educator, you're an instructional designer.
Well, there's really 5 threads that have woven this tapestry.
We don't have time for 5. We don't have time for 5. Give me 3.
I had a lot of experience in my youth in speaking. And then I went back and got a PhD in the empirical development of curriculum. And then I started working with corporations, developing leadership seminars and training seminars, wanted to make sure they were effective. And then I got a job working as the director of education for an online company that used this voice analysis engine technology to teach English as a second language. So any instructional designers, curriculum developers need to work with subject matter experts. My subject matter experts were all teaching English as a second language. So I learned all about that, and then I went to consult with a hospital on their communication problems. And this is what I came up with, and it all came together beautifully.
Okay. You are an entrepreneur, a first-time entrepreneur.
First time.
And you've been at it now for 5 years. If you could turn the clock back 5 years, what lessons have you learned? What might you do differently as a result of the experience?
Well, there's not enough time, as you said, for me to list those lessons. And I haven't been in it enough time, 5 years, but I feel like I'm not done learning. We met with someone recently who said, just remember these 3 rules. It takes longer, it costs more. And the third one is it takes longer and costs more than you think. It has, and I think that what I've learned is if I could do it all over again, I'd allow more time. I'd set aside more money or seek funding earlier. And the third thing is I would ask for help from others more. I would ask people to come alongside to complement the areas where I had huge gaps in my knowledge. When you have a bunch of letters after your name, you can think you know it all, but when it comes to business and entrepreneurship, I didn't know jack. And so I have had to ask people to help me. And you know what? In the entrepreneur community, there's people that are really helpful and really know what they're talking about and are more than happy to come alongside you.
But how have you handled, as an entrepreneur, again, 5 years of your life, your treasure and so on, you've gotten this project, this venture up to a certain point where you think it's ready to launch. And then somebody comes along and says, no, wait a minute, you're heading in the wrong direction. You may have a good product, but you're not heading it in the right market, because it's not scalable, because it's not fundable, because you think they should be paying for it, but they don't think they should be, et cetera, et cetera. And so you should pivot over in this direction. That's got to be gut-wrenching to be told your baby isn't quite as cute as you thought.
No, wait a minute. Do you want to know how I did handle it or how I should have handled it?
The former.
Well, how I did handle it was, first, I got angry. And then second, I got reactive. And then third, I would create arguments and write manifestos as to why it should be the way it should be. And then I sat down with someone else I was asking help from, and he recommended a book by Darren Hardy, the publisher of Success magazine, called The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster. And I read that book, and I thought, it's not about sales, marketing, funding. It's about, can you handle the emotional strain of the ups and downs? And so I think one of the things that I've learned is to make less of an emotional investment in the outcome. I had to put all of my emotions in the development of the product.
Yes.
But now that I've given birth to the baby and it's growing, just like you have to do with children in elementary school, and teenagers and young adults, you eventually have to let them go, but the growth process is a lot faster, and I'm having to let it go and let others guide the development into adulthood.
So most really good entrepreneurs that I know don't do it for the money. Obviously, they hope that there will be a financial payoff, but they do it because there is a passion to fix a problem.
Yeah.
Most of the healthcare devices and so on that I've seen, the inventors, the originators, the people responsible for driving it, the passion has come out of personal experience with a family member, someone else they knew, a close friend, that they weren't satisfied with the treatment, the device, whatever it was that was at the time available. What's driving this, and what's your wish for your venture? Am I making myself clear?
You want me to give you a wish list, or
what is your wish for your venture? Obviously, you would hope to make money, but that can't be the only reason you've invested in this and are still learning.
No, you
have an opportunity for transformational change in the quality of care and patient satisfaction.
Healthcare education is saturated with information. Anybody that's gone to nursing school or med school will tell you that. That's why there's so many acronyms for memorizing information, information, information. Roberta and I really want to institute transformation. We want people to be sensitive to cultural differences, appreciate the cultural differences, be able to communicate with those who strengthen their staff, and that's going to take a lot of wisdom and a lot of communicating clearly on our part.
Okay. My guest today has been Ted Ewing, Dr. Ted Ewing, linguist, educator, instructional designer, and so on, who has a dream, has a mission. And also an entrepreneur, first-time entrepreneur. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Good luck.
Thanks, Rick.
Because it will help me order a grilled cheese sandwich next time. This is the Entrepreneurs Network. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves.